Hello, everybody. Mr. Foley here, and welcome to the Renaissance, the period of rebirth, a time for change in Europe. We are finally out of the Middle Ages. We are done with so much of the warfare and the death and the plague and ugh, all that hard stuff. And now we're to a new period, a period where we start to see more business, more money's flowing, trade is happening, there's more job opportunities. It's a good feeling, to say the least. And so we're going to look at this unit. We're starting off with just kind of some of the basics, and then we'll get into more details about a variety of topics. Now, for this, if you're watching this, you're going to be filling in the Renaissance basic notes, and they should look like this right here. You'll see that throughout there are some stopping points, and for those stopping points, let me fix a little error there. I'll talk about them and I'll give you a little time to write down your ideas and your thoughts as we go along. So, Renaissance basics. Here we go. Let's begin. All right. So, to begin, we're going to start off with, what are some of the reasons for the end of feudalism? Feudalism with the lords, telling the serfs what to do, and the serfs are providing the goods for the king, and the king has his knights that are fighting for him, all that kind of stuff. So there's a few different reasons why it ends. It doesn't work anymore. And we kind of talked about some of these reasons before. So try to figure it out, and then you can fill in the top part of your notes. So here we go. The first one, what do we got here? Well, we have the Black Plague kills 1/3 of the population. Think about that, 1/3. That's crazy talk, right? 1 out of every 3 people dies. And the reason that ends feudalism is that you don't have the stability anymore. You have lords that die, and nobody's in charge of that part of the land. You have serfs that are dead, and all of a sudden you don't have enough workers. You have knights that die off, and if you're attacked, maybe you don't have enough people. All that causes chaos, and it leads to the end of this feudalism system. But it also gives the serfs, the lower class, a little more power, because now they can move around because everybody wants them, because their buddies have died, sadly. Part 2, what do you think this is? I kind of gave it away already, sorry. The peasants and the serfs demand more freedom. They want freedom. They want to be able to decide their future. They're starting to see some people moving into the towns, and they say, hey, I want to live in town. I want to be a blacksmith maybe, instead of just, producing wheat, whatever it might be. And so they want more freedom. Third, we didn't talk about this, but this is a big one. There's a war called the 100 Years' War, and it's a war between Great Britain and France. And when they fight, what we see is that the kings kind of circumvent the nobles. It's a big word, circumvent. Instead of looking to the nobles for warriors to help them fight, they begin to raise their own armies. And this gives the kings a lot more power, and it kind of brings it to the point where they don't need the nobles as much. We saw that as well when towns increase and other things like that too. Fourth, all right, this guy goes here and makes this. Well, people move to the cities for higher wages. They're getting specialized jobs. They're making money. They're doing a lot better than they were as peasants. I mean, look at, he can afford this beautiful costume. Nah, I'm just kidding. He would actually have real clothes. They didn't wear costumes. But yeah, you can make some more money. You can do a lot better. And so people move to the cities. And feudalism can't work with that. They need workers who are going to stay in the farms. And if they don't, well, the system it's kind of shot. It's not going to work. So that's no good if you want feudalism. I don't. So it's great. And lastly, status is now determined by wealth and ability and not birthright. You're no longer seen as higher class because your dad's a king. You're seen as higher class because you have money, or you have wealth, or you have prestige, whatever it might be. And so that's a huge switch. And this is a pretty big one for us in America today. While some people, yeah, they're famous and they're wealthy because of birthright, we don't have as much of that anymore. People now are more powerful because they have money, because they have certain abilities and things like that. So that's a big switch. It really impacts us today too. Okay, so we are looking at Europe around 1500. You can still have the Holy Roman Empire. We have France split off and Italy broke off here. We have some bigger kingdoms. We don't have a ton that are too small anymore. So we're kind of out of those small kingdom stage. So the Renaissance, what is it? Well, first off, it means it's the rebirth of art, classical learning, and this belief that humans actually have potential. We're not all losers. It can do nothing. No, we can do things. We can learn things, and that's good. So art, We start to gain better perspective and it becomes more realistic. You see perspective where things, when they go away, and narrow in, it's kind of like a train track feel that you sometimes see. We'll look at that. You can tell I'm not an artist. I didn't explain that very well. Classical learning. The scholars start to look to the past. They look to the Greeks and the Romans and they say, hey, what good ideas do they have that we kind of lost track of? And they look for those again. And finally, this belief in human potential. Scientific discoveries allow humans to understand the world a lot better. And as we understand things, we get excited because we know that we used to. We know more than we used to, and that's a great thing. And so we start to understand space. We start to understand the body and its anatomy. We start to understand how, things like, gravity work, which is pretty cool. And so it's this rebirth because we're blending old ideas with new knowledge and new technology. And that makes for a whole different world than what we had seen in the past. So why does this occur? Well, there's a few of them. Number one, merchants organize banks and gain money. We're no longer working on the barter system. We're starting to focus now on money and banks. And so it makes it a lot easier to trade because you have money that you can actually use. And the banks start to give out loans, and that increases the size of the business and it helps its ability to expand. And as it expands more and more, well, then you're going to have more trade, you're going to have more wealth, you're going to have a lot of good things, right? And so these factors still play in today. If you think about it, nobody today would say this, hey, I want to buy the table that you made. Would you like 5 pounds of wheat or $20? Of course we want $20 because money works a lot better for trade. We've talked about this in class, but it wouldn't work very well if I got paid in goods from you instead of being paid from the district. So instead of getting a paycheck from the district, you just bring in a goat and that's 1 week's worth of education. That'd be a terrible system. I don't need a goat. Maybe a hippo or something cool would work, but not a goat. So today's world, what do we see? We see that, banks offer loans so we can buy businesses, such as this building here, which was featured in the office. We can buy cars, maybe something nicer than we have the money for right away. We can, travel. Back then, their travel was, using loans to expand their fleet or buy bigger ships, whatever it might be. And, we buy houses today. So all these things are very important today, but back then those loans help businesses. They help get transportation out there, all that good stuff. That's reason number one. Reason number two, Italian cities became wealthy through trade. And so you see cities like Florence, Italy, with the Medici family become extremely wealthy because of the trade that's going on. A lot of textiles were going through there, a lot of banking, that kind of stuff. It's kind of like New York City. If you look at New York City, there's a lot of wealth there, and that's because of the trade that flows through it, all the goods that go back and forth and things like that. So it's not a new concept that trade creates wealth, but it's certainly one that's lasted throughout time. Next, the Crusades. We talked about those in our Middle Ages unit. The Crusaders going out from Europe to try to defend Jerusalem and take it back. Well, as they go to different territories, they start to learn more about the world, and they're curious about that. That's interesting to them. Not surprisingly. I had a friend named Chris, and Chris went to China for a trip, and he came back, and all of a sudden he had all this interest in China and things that we never knew he was interested in before. When you travel, you gain new interest. And that's what happened with the Renaissance. They start to meet new people and they learn ideas and they want to bring those home. All right. So you think about if you go to these different countries in the world, you're going to learn some new things, and that's probably going to affect how you live afterwards. Next, wealthy families like the Medici in Florence use their profits to promote education and the arts. So the Medici were very powerful. They were in banking, they're in a variety of different things, and they gain wealth. But they don't just keep that wealth for themselves. They hire some of the best artists in the world to come and produce amazing things. Brunelleschi creates this dome and this beautiful church. We see Michelangelo came in, Donatello, all these amazing artists, because they felt that their job as wealthy individuals was not only to increase their wealth, but promote the betterment of other people. And we still see this in some ways with the wealthy, and sometimes we don't. But one person that I've seen that does a lot of this is Bill Gates and his wife, Melinda. They've worked a lot in terms of using their wealth to help people in impoverished countries working with things like vaccines for malaria or helping with food production. Right now, they're sponsoring some money to go towards coronavirus vaccines because they know that that will help everybody. But their quote here that I love is, leaving kids massive amounts of money is not a favor to them. So we'll be leaving our $81 billion fortune to charity. And so some people look at, the Medici back in the day, or they look at the Gates today and they say, look at how filthy rich they are. That's disgusting. Or you can look at them and say, hey, they made a lot of money for themselves, but they're using it in ways that are benefiting other people. And when the Medici do that in the Renaissance, that's putting a lot more people to work, and that's elevating everybody's lives. Plus, it's helping them stay in power, which is kind of a side effect that's pretty good for them too. Reason number 5, artists and scholars study ancient Greeks and Romans for inspiration. They look back to the Greek and the Roman sculptures and paintings and things like that, and they create their own, like the Mona Lisa. They take the old ideas and they make them better, and they find ways to improve that. And that's kind of a constant thing we've always seen throughout time. If you think about automobiles, when the Model T came out, it was revolutionary, but we didn't stop there. We decided to add shocks and lights and cruise control and all kinds of different things and make it better. And so if you look today, this is a group of people going to see the Mona Lisa, which is crazy. I love all the people holding up their cameras as if they're going to get a good picture of the Mona Lisa. Some people I saw, they said they took pictures just to take pictures of people taking pictures of the Mona Lisa, which is funny. But, we still learn from art in the past. People study the Renaissance because of the amazing techniques that they had, and they try to build on that. And so that's what people were doing, whether it was artists or scholars, trying to learn from the past to gain more knowledge. So time for a notes break. Check out the notes. You're going to see a box like this in the bottom, and it says this: choose 3 of the reasons above for why the Renaissance occurred. Explain how they still play a huge role in our world today. So talk about 3 of these and talk about the ways in which they still impact us today. Okay, so you can stop the video for a second, work on that, and then we'll come back. All right, I'm back. So this Renaissance, this change in life, more money flowing, more trade, more art, more education, all of that. Well, where did it happen and why? Well, it starts in Italy first, much earlier than it did the northern part of Europe, for a few reasons. Well, Italy was a perfect spot for trade. It was located in the Mediterranean Sea, and there's a lot of places that they could trade with. So that helped them out a lot. But the other thing is, in the north, they had a lot of fighting going on. They had this 100 Years' War between France and Britain. And so all of their money was really going towards these wars. Whereas in Italy, the money was going towards trade, and that led to more money for education, more money for roads, more money for art, all these different things. And so you really see this choice, do you want trade or do you want to fight? And sometimes we've seen that throughout history, that when you do go to war, you lose out on some other things. For example, President Johnson, after President Kennedy was assassinated, had this idea for the Great Society, where he wanted to make America really great in terms of helping out those who are poor. But what happened was we got really embroiled in the Vietnam War, and we're sending more and more soldiers over, more and more supplies. And all that money he planned to give to these programs to help the poor went to the war instead. And that's one of the things that frustrated him in life. And we see that sometimes that can happen. So another notes break. Man, they were quick. The Renaissance started later in the North due to fighting. Do you think wars prevent humans from achieving good advancements that improve life? Now, you can totally disagree with me. I don't care, in this one at least. Do you think they do? Can you think of an example of, yes, we spent all this money and because of that we couldn't do this? Or no, I don't think they do, and here's why I don't think they do. Take a second and try that out. See what you can come up with. All right, so what do we see focused on in the Renaissance? We've talked about a lot of this. One of the big things is trade. And you can see Italy is perfect for trade. The Mediterranean allows ships to flow to various different areas. They are kind of a gateway into Europe, and so they trade all over the place. And it provides new products that areas had never seen. Products like silk and porcelain and spices coming from Asia and different goods coming from Africa. And the merchants become filthy rich. They get a lot of money because they are able to trade with everybody, and they can be kind of a go-between of Asia and Africa with Europe. The second focus is art, literature, and architecture. Painting, sculpture, architecture, pottery. There's new forms and techniques that come out as well. And the big reason they can focus on art and literature and architecture is because people have money. In the Middle Ages, there was no money, and it's really hard to live as an artist if nobody's going to hire you. Well, in the Renaissance, they loved art. And so they were hiring artists like crazy, which is pretty cool. So some of the new techniques that come out, one of the big ones is perspective. You kind of have a center point that everything is drawn to, and you can see the lines moving in. It makes it look more realistic. It makes it look more 3D. When you look at Middle Ages art and art from the Greeks and Romans, you don't really see perspective. Okay, here's the School of Athens, which is a great painting, and you can definitely see that perspective here, and it makes it seem like the hallways are real on a flat surface. It makes it look 3D, which is pretty cool. So they get better with art because they have the money to, you know, revise their techniques. If I'm an artist, but I have to farm, I don't have time to get better. Well, they had time to get better because the rich like the Medicis would hire them for maybe 6 months or a year to make some artwork, which is interesting. So notes break. All right. Think of something that you have learned from someone in a previous generation. So maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a family friend, whatever it might be. Provide an example below of what you learned from them, and explain why you feel it might be important to have people from the past to learn from. So I think about, my dad and my grandpa. I learned from my dad how to work hard because I grew up on a farm, and that was really important to him. And, every day I went out and I was able to work with him. And so I learned a good work ethic. Heck, I don't know what time it is. It's like 11:15 at night and I'm working on school because I know it's important, and working hard is important. And, he learned that from his dad. And so that's something that's been passed on, just as we see with the Renaissance, ideas passed on and things like that. So provide your example below and explain why it's important to have people from the past that we learn from. So take a minute for that. Go ahead. All right, another focus. Many people become patrons and they're financially supporting the arts. The Catholic Church was a big patron of the arts. They felt that some of the money should be used to make beautiful art that glorifies God. Okay, and with writing, you see more self-expression and guidance, and you start to see magnificent buildings really combine architecture and works of art. The Duomo in Florence, Italy, this dome and the massive amounts of technology and ideas it took to make it, just a beautiful building. And that's because you have people that financially supported. The Medici family paid for that church to a large degree, which is really cool. But it also helped them to gain some power, which we'll focus on in future units. Another focus is humanism, the idea that we have potential as humans. And so, the humanists in the Renaissance studied the ancient Greeks and the Romans, and they tried to learn more about the world and how they operated. And in the Middle Ages, some of the ideas of the Romans were lost because there was such chaos. We literally lost these ideas. For example, concrete. Think about everything that's made out of concrete today. The Romans had it, but we lost it in the Middle Ages. And people going back to look at scrolls, to look at documents, to analyze buildings and stuff, figured out how to do it again. And so, a classic example of this is the Pantheon made by the Romans to honor their gods. And you had two things going on here. You had this concrete that it's made of, and then you had a dome structure. And for a very long time period, they didn't know how to make a dome. And when this building was made, they built the building, but nobody could figure out how to make the dome until the Medicis hired a man named Brunelleschi. And what he did was he went back to Rome and he looked at this concrete dome in the Pantheon, and he figured out how to make it, which is really cool. And so humanism is all about, what is our potential as humans? What can we learn from the past, and what can we learn now? And the second part about it is they want knowledge. and they want to achieve new things. And they wouldn't simply accept that things occur because God wanted them to. And so we're not going to fall in this trap that, oh, if something's bad, God must be upset. If something's good, God must love me. They didn't fall into that trap. They looked at things very differently. So in the Middle Ages, when the plague came, some people said, this is God punishing us. And then in the Renaissance, you gain new tools like the microscope. You start to understand the body more. And now we look at it and we say, well, viruses and germs are getting us sick. There's very few people today that are saying, the coronavirus pandemic is God punishing us. People look at it and say, oh, well, it's, this illness that is spread in these ways, and this is how it operates. So science becomes bigger with humanism because we understand if we know science, we can understand ourselves better and we can make a better world. So that was a really big focus. All right, notes break. Take a look at A, B, and C above that we just talked about. Do you think these are still important ideas in our world today? Do they still matter to us today, or are we kind of just thrown to the side and we're done with them? So yes or no, and then explain your answer. Just take a break, work on that, and then come back. All right, the next idea is secularism. Secularism is a focus on the world and less focus on God. The Middle Ages really focused on God a lot, largely because life was really bad for a lot of people, and they found hope in God. But as things got better, they didn't necessarily, see a need for God as much. They're starting to understand how things work better. And so some people start thinking, hey, maybe we don't need God as much. Maybe we can learn things ourselves. Or others simply become wealthy and, they focus on other things. And so what we see is that, belief in God and really putting all your time and effort into faith, that kind of decreases. And we see increases in things like art and things that people like. We see increases in wealth and money and people trying to make money. And we see more parties and things like that where people are trying to live it up in life. So big changes there in terms of how people view the world and the importance of God. So a quick notes break here. Do you believe secularism is a big focus of many people today? Do people focus more on the current world and moment than they do on God and what might come after this life? So, take a minute and think about that and provide your answer. What do you think? All right, some of the other focuses we see, the Renaissance man. I love the idea of the Renaissance man. This is the person who is very wise and knowledgeable and excels in many different things. And so you can see here, this person understands the Bible. They look to the past and gain knowledge. They're educated. They are, good with fighting with a sword. And over here, they can make food and all that kind of stuff. A Renaissance man is a person that can do everything, is very good in many different things. They're not just limited to one thing. So when I think about a modern Renaissance man, I think of my friend Tom. Tom breeds cattle for a living. He's really good at it. Some of these cattle that he breeds, he sells for tens of thousands of dollars at points. He breeds cattle for a living. And, when you talk to him, farming's really big to him. But if you get to know the guy, he's a Renaissance man. His wife's an artist, and so he has an appreciation for the arts. When he's driving between farms, he's listening to NPR and he's listening to podcasts to understand the world better. He's into literature. He's into a lot of different things. And so the Renaissance man's like Tom. It's a person who is well-versed in a variety of things instead of just one. Now, where does all of this work? Where does it all happen? Well, everything kind of starts out with Florence, Italy, just north of Rome, for a few reasons. Number one, they had a lot of cloth and linen that was being sold throughout Europe, and so they're expanding and making money there. But they also had really good banking. The Medicis and the Albizzi families had banks there. And so as they give out loans, more and more business can expand and get bigger, and people do better because of that. And so this is your city right there. It's a beautiful place. I'd love to go there someday. It's quite gorgeous. And why is it that way? Well, there's a lot of patrons of the arts there too. Wealthy people support the artists in that era. And, there's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of money. And so if we look, even today, if you go to Florence, some of the things that you'll see, the artists that came were amazing. You had Michelangelo was there. Just an amazing artist. Botticelli, who's a great artist as well. Fra Angelico. I don't know that person as well. Oh, monk. Interesting. Donatello. Cool. Okay. Lorenzo Ghiberti. Filippo Brunelleschi. He made a huge dome on the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. Masaccio. And all these amazing artists came here because there was money. And so, you know, that's why it's the birthplace of the Renaissance. So that's what we got. That's the basics. That's what matters. That's what's important. That's where it begins and why. So if you have any questions, feel free to talk to your teacher, but that should give you a good overview for what the Renaissance is and what it was all about. Have a great day, and we will see you later.